The nature of modern celebrity exists in a fragile equilibrium between public adulation and total isolation, a high-stakes environment where the trajectory of a human life can be completely rewritten under the relentless glare of the global spotlight. For decades, the world has watched individuals of immense privilege navigate the strict boundaries of tradition, only to witness sudden, dramatic fractures that reshape empires of public opinion. When a prominent figure, accustomed to the rigid structures of a historic lifestyle, suddenly breaks free to pursue an entirely different existence across the ocean, the immediate narrative is often one of liberation and romantic triumph. However, beneath the polished surface of this newly acquired freedom, a more complex and unsettling psychological dynamic often begins to unfold, leaving observers to ponder the true cost of independence. The transition from a vibrant, universally recognized public persona to a reclusive figure ensconced behind massive estate walls raises fundamental questions about influence, autonomy, and the invisible forces that govern high-profile relationships in the modern era, leaving an international audience divided between genuine concern and profound skepticism. As the initial excitement of this dramatic departure begins to fade, the public gaze inevitably shifts toward the underlying mechanics of this new life, noting a sequence of profound behavioral changes that challenge the very essence of the individual's former self. Friends of many years find themselves abruptly cast aside. Communication channels with lifelong support systems are systematically severed, and the once familiar charm of a beloved cultural figure is replaced by an entirely foreign vocabulary. To many close observers, this complete overhaul of personality suggests something far more intricate than simple personal growth. It begins to mirror a process of systematic reprogramming, where one partner exerts an overwhelming degree of psychological control over the other. If the traditional roles in this grand narrative were reversed, and it were a vulnerable princess isolated within a heavily fortified compound, cut off from every familiar face after experiencing profound personal grief, the global community would immediately sound the alarm, labeling the situation as a deeply concerning instance of emotional coercion. Yet, because the individual in question is a man who once embodied a carefree, rebellious spirit, the world struggles to reconcile his current compliance with his past autonomy, wondering how a natural leader could be so thoroughly transformed into a vehicle for someone else's ambitions. Understanding these complex human narratives requires a willingness to look past the carefully curated press releases and examine the raw human motivations driving the headlines. It is within these subtle shifts of power and public perception that the true story resides, challenging us to question what happens when the illusion of a perfect life begins to fracture under its own immense weight. As we prepare to unravel the specific events, the financial pressures, and the strategic maneuvers that have brought this international drama to a critical tipping point, we invite you to become an active part of this ongoing investigation. Taking a quick moment to subscribe to this channel ensures that you remain fully informed as we analyze the shifting tides of global culture and the hidden realities of those who live within its most exclusive circles, providing you with deep insights that go far beyond the surface-level commentary found elsewhere. The growing discomfort surrounding this high-profile partnership is further magnified by a stark contrast between the lofty, idealized language used in public broadcasts and the increasingly transactional nature of their real-world endeavors. The carefree archetype that once captivated audiences has been completely replaced by an intense, almost formulaic adherence to a specific brand of modern ideology, often dismissed by critics as a repetitive cycle of self-righteous rhetoric that alienates the very public that once offered unconditional support. This profound shift has created a significant divide among audiences worldwide, leaving former admirers deeply conflicted as they witness a total departure from the genuine authenticity that once defined the individual. The surrounding environment, characterized by an impenetrable barrier of luxury and absolute seclusion, only serves to intensify the speculation that this new existence is not a sanctuary of peace, but rather a gilded cage where every public statement and every strategic move is tightly monitored and dictated by a singular dominant force determined to reshape a legacy to fit a specific commercial blueprint. This brings the narrative to its most volatile chapter yet, where the high-minded ideals of independence collide directly with the harsh, uncompromising realities of global commerce and dwindling public interest. When a brand built entirely on the prestige of a rejected institution begins to lose its vital media traction, the resulting panic can trigger a series of desperate measures designed to recapture the global spotlight at any cost. Reports of plummeting digital engagement, stagnant business ventures, and a severe miscalculation regarding the marketability of everyday domestic products, repackaged at astronomical prices, suggest that the ultimate gamble for financial autonomy is on the verge of a catastrophic collapse. The realization that relevance cannot be sustained through isolation alone has forced a dramatic reassessment of strategy, setting the stage for a highly controversial move that may involve using the most vulnerable elements of their private life as a shield against a deeply resentful public. A development we will explore fully in the next segment of this report. The shifting dynamics of global celebrity often reach a critical juncture where public curiosity transforms into a sharp, unforgiving scrutiny, forcing a stark confrontation between carefully manufactured images and the unyielding realities of public sentiment. As the initial novelty of a glamorous transatlantic defiance begins to wane, a profound fatigue has settled over an international audience that was once deeply invested in this saga of apparent liberation. Recent data reveals a devastating trend for the couple residing in their heavily fortified California enclave, as statistical metrics indicate that their media traction and pulling power have entered a period of rapid, unprecedented decline. In a striking turn of events, public opinion surveys conducted on both sides of the Atlantic have officially designated them among the absolute least interesting members of the historic institution they so publicly abandoned, signaling that the global public is simply turning the page. This drastic loss of cultural relevance has created an existential crisis for a brand that is inherently dependent on the oxygen of constant publicity, leaving its architects to scramble for a viable strategy to reverse a downward spiral that threatens their very livelihood and long-term viability. Faced with this precipitous drop in mainstream viability, the underlying mechanics of their survival strategy have been laid bare, exposing a deeply cynical reality that directly contradicts their previous public pronouncements. For years, the core narrative championed by the couple focused heavily on the toxic and destructive nature of their former institutional life, portraying it as an environment that severely jeopardized their mental health and compromised their personal safety. Yet, as their independent commercial ventures begin to stall, observers are witnessing a frantic effort to engineer a high-profile reconciliation with the exact same entity they so fiercely vilified. This glaring paradox has left even their most dedicated online defenders in a state of profound confusion and betrayal, forced to wonder why anyone would actively pursue a reunion with an organization they previously labeled as fundamentally oppressive and harmful. The uncomfortable truth becoming increasingly obvious to media analysts is that without a tangible, ongoing connection to the historic prestige of the British monarchy, the couple possesses very little inherent marketability, turning their current maneuver into a transparent, desperate bid to reignite the media feud that served as their primary source of global attention. This strategic desperation is heavily compounded by a string of severe commercial failures that have turned their highly publicized business ambitions into a subject of widespread ridicule within corporate TE circles. The launch of a premium lifestyle brand intended to establish a billion-dollar empire selling mundane domestic goods at astronomical price points has officially arrived at a catastrophic operational impasse. Retail experts have revealed that due to massive overestimation of public demand, warehouses are currently filled to the ceiling with unsold, overpriced specialty food items, artisanal candles, and home decor items that are rapidly gathering dust and cobwebs. Because many of these products are organic foodstuffs, they are bound by strict, rapidly approaching expiration dates set for the upcoming summer season. With industry analysts projecting imminent financial losses exceeding $5 million, the entire business venture is described as being on its absolute last legs, completely shattering the illusion of the independent, self-made entrepreneurial powerhouse and forcing a frantic pivot back toward the only reliable source of currency they have left, their fractious relationship with the royal family. The looming prospect of a return to British soil to drum up vital publicity has set the stage for an incredibly tense, high-stakes public relations battle, particularly regarding how the couple intends to navigate a deeply resentful and hostile British public. Rumours of an impending journey to London have ignited an intense debate over the potential deployment of what many critics are calling a grand-scale piece of emotional blackmail. There is a growing, dark speculation among royal commentators that the couple may choose to utilize their young children, whose faces have been fiercely guarded from the public eye for years under the guise of privacy, as a literal human shield against public hostility. The calculated theory suggests that by presenting these innocent children to the public and the media during official family milestones, the Duchess would effectively immunize herself against the vocal boos and public jeers that would otherwise inevitably greet her arrival. However, this high-risk strategy is entirely dependent on maintaining absolute control over a volatile narrative, a feat that becomes virtually impossible when stepping directly into the unforgiving, hyper-competitive arena of the international press corps. The moment these children cross into British territory, the fragile illusions of privacy that the couple has attempted to enforce from their distant estate will immediately collide with the reality of an aggressive global paparazzi industry. While mainstream British newspapers strictly adhere to voluntary ethical guidelines and editorial agreements that protect the privacy of royal minors, international photo agencies and tabloid outlets across Europe, Australia, and the United States operate under no such constraints. Independent photographers, driven by the immense financial rewards tied to capturing the first clear, unverified images of these hidden children, are entirely indifferent to domestic press rules or personal appeals for boundaries. Any public appearance, therefore, guarantees that the tightly controlled mystery surrounding the children's identities will be permanently dismantled within hours, with the resulting images splashed across global media markets. This inevitable loss of control presents a severe dilemma for the family, as it forces them to choose between maintaining their children's complete seclusion or sacrificing that privacy entirely in order to generate the massive, positive column inches desperately required to rescue their failing bank balance and restore their crumbling global standing. The culmination of this long, twisting saga reveals a stark truth about the nature of modern influence, demonstrating that when public figures completely detach themselves from the foundations that originally granted them authority, the road back is fraught with immense peril and inevitable compromise. The calculated plan to engineer a high-profile return to the heart of the British monarchy represents much more than a simple desire for family reconciliation. It is a profound admission of total commercial failure. A final, frantic roll of the dice by individuals who have exhausted every alternative path to sustainable global relevance. For years, the narrative of absolute independence from the historic institution was sold to the public as a triumph of personal agency, a glorious escape from a toxic and outdated environment. Yet, when the glittering facade of California independence is stripped away, what remains is the sobering reality of a failing lifestyle brand, empty warehouses filled with expiring, overpriced merchandise, and a catastrophic 33% drop in digital traffic that signals a permanent decline in public interest. This dramatic reversal of fortune forces a total capitulation, showing that their entire economic and social survival remains utterly dependent on the very institution they built their new identities trying to dismantle. To understand how this critical tipping point was reached, one must look closely at the complex backgrounds and evolving motivations of the primary actors in this international drama. The Duke, a man whose early life was defined by the profound, universally felt tragedy of losing his mother, spent decades operating as a beloved, fun-loving cultural figure, protected by the fierce loyalty of a nation that viewed his rebellious streaks with genuine affection. His identity was deeply rooted in the tight protective unit of his family, and a lifelong network of close friends who formed an impenetrable emotional support system. However, the introduction of a completely foreign dynamic, driven by a fiercely ambitious partner steeped in the hyper-commercialized culture of West Coast entertainment, initiated a rapid and total transformation of his character. Within a remarkably short period, the carefree prince was systematically isolated from his oldest companions, severed from his familial bonds, and reconditioned to speak in a rigid vocabulary of clinical self-help jargon and corporate woke ideology. This complete shift in personality has left an international audience to conclude that he is no longer the architect of his own destiny, but rather the tragic subject of a highly sophisticated form of psychological control, functioning as a vehicle for someone else's relentless ambition. The Duchess, whose professional origins in the highly competitive and transactional world of North American television shaped her approach to public life, has consistently viewed the historic traditions of the monarchy through the narrow lens of modern celebrity branding. For her, the ancient prestige of the royal family was not a sacred duty to be upheld through selfless public service, but a vast reservoir of intellectual property to be commodified, packaged, and sold to the highest bidder on the global market. When the rigid boundaries of royal protocol refused to bend to her commercial ambitions, the decision was made to execute a dramatic, highly publicized departure, setting up a rival court in an affluent coastal enclave. Yet, this strategy fundamentally misunderstood the nature of royal status, which derives its unique value from its permanence, its dignity, and its absolute separation from the vulgar whims of the marketplace. By attempting to compete in the mundane arena of lifestyle commercialism, selling ordinary domestic items at extortionate prices, she effectively cheapened the very brand she was trying to exploit, reducing a historic legacy to a series of ridiculed business pitches that the public ultimately rejected. The immediate consequence of this profound miscalculation is the creation of a vast, disillusioned demographic of former supporters who now find themselves completely abandoned in the wake of the couple's shifting strategies. For over half a decade, a dedicated online fan base fiercely defended every controversial decision, embraced every accusation leveled against the royal household, and fully invested themselves in the narrative of a progressive couple fighting against a deeply flawed, outdated establishment. Today, those same loyal followers are left in a state of acute confusion and anger as they witness their idols preparing to fly across the ocean to seek a positive photo opportunity with the very king they previously condemned. This blatant inconsistency exposes the deeply transactional nature of the entire enterprise, proving to their core audience that principles are easily discarded when financial survival is at stake. The realization that their fierce online advocacy was merely a tool used to sustain a corporate brand has triggered a massive wave of detachment, accelerating the collapse of their social capital and leaving them dangerously isolated in the global cultural landscape as the inevitable confrontation draws near. The potential involvement of the innocent children born into this high-stakes environment bent introduces a deeply troubling ethical dimension to the entire spectacle. The prospect of utilizing these young minors, whose identities have been aggressively shielded from the public for years, as a strategic shield against a hostile and resentful public, is viewed by many as an act of supreme desperation. The calculated gamble relies on the assumption that even the most furious critics will refrain from expressing their genuine displeasure in the presence of innocent children, thereby allowing the parents to navigate public spaces without facing the humiliating choruses of disapproval that would otherwise greet them. However, this desperate maneuver ignores the relentless, predatory nature of the international paparazzi industry, which operates completely outside the ethical boundaries of domestic press agreements. The moment these children are brought into the public arena for the sake of positive column inches, the illusion of their privacy will be shattered forever. Their faces commodified by global media outlets in a frenzy of uncontrolled exposure that the parents will be entirely powerless to stop. Ultimately, this ongoing saga serves as a powerful, cautionary tale about the limits of modern self-reinvention and the volatile nature of global celebrity culture. It demonstrates with absolute clarity that relevance cannot be manufactured through perpetual grievance, nor can a lasting legacy be built on the systematic destruction of